Saudi Arabia in the last decade has emerged as a major investor in global sport. From football to golf to entertainment, wrestling and motorsport, Saudi firms have pumped their cash into major investments across the world. As recently as 3 days ago, Saudi Aramco, one of the world's largest producers of oil, announced a bumper new deal with FIFA, the world's football governance body, which makes Aramco FIFA's largest sponsor. Amidst all of this, the sport of cricket has not escaped the Saudi investment juggernaut's eyes. Saudi Aramco is also one of ICC's biggest partners. The Indian Premier League has a direct investment from the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the form of Saudi Tourism Authority. This presents India with an extremely unique opportunity to skip to the front of the queue with cricket. India can be an equal partner in Saudi's bid to invite cricket into its fold of major sporting events. India can provide the know-how, the crowds and the manpower to drive Saudi Arabia's foray into cricket. We'll talk about this and more prospects that lie in front of cricket with our guest. Joining us on the show is Ambassador Mr Kapoor, former diplomat. Also joining us is Adit Kothari, foreign affairs expert. Dr. Rajesh Jauhri, senior journalist, joining us on the program too. Last but not the least, Dr. Sharath Kohli, senior economist, with us on the program as well. Dr. Kohli, I'll begin with you. How important do you think it is for cricket to have a partner? I wouldn't call it a sponsor. A partner like Saudi Arabia, a country that perhaps realizes that oil is getting over. It's the age of electric vehicles, so they need more routes to enhance their popularity as well as their relevance. Do you think that when it comes to dealing with India, cricket can be a great platform both the countries to exchange a lot of trade as well as exchange a lot of goodwill?
Indeed, Vineet. I mean, cricket, this is a cricket crazy nation, and any nation who wants to become friends with India, start a relationship with India, start trade with India, I think taking the cricket route, I would say, is one of the best route you could choose. And I find Saudi Arabia has been going through a radical transformation over the last few years, ever since MBS, as he's more popularly known as, Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince. Ever since he's come into the picture, as you rightly said, they have realized that oil cannot last forever, number one. Number two, because of the fluctuations in the prices and because of the OPEC domination in the prices, I think they have realized that, people have started looking for alternates. And the way EVs are catching up across the world, I think it's a matter of time. And there could be a point of inflection when suddenly you will find that EVs, the problem of lithium batteries, the problem of battery not lasting, the problem of infrastructure relating to EVs. I think all these problems, I feel there's going to be a point of inflection very soon. What happened from analog phone to smartphone, we found all of a sudden, people had smartphones in their hands or something like this. I've got an intuition that something like this will happen. And all of a sudden, these petrol and diesel or oil, shall I say, will gradually becoming a thing, start becoming a thing of past. So I think realizing that, I know for sure that all the Islamic countries, they have advised their generations next that please study more, please train yourself to be professionals, please look for other professions, look for other businesses, do not depend on oil forever. So I think they have started educating, there are more universities coming up. I think in the same manner, Saudi Arabia started making investment in sports because, after all, there is a principle in marketing, Vineet, which says "Jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai." It's all about branding. So I think no way better than to enter into the world of golf, into the world of cricket, into the world of football, soccer. They're just trying their best to first of all make their visibility to the rest of the world. Once you're visible, you can start selling whatever you want to. You can start attracting investments. Investments being made by your country would be welcomed in the other country. Bilateral trade is going to increase. I think it just opens a number of doors for you when you get into that kind of relationship. So I think in anticipation of future, and I feel MBS is a very revolutionary leader. We see women driving in Saudi Arabia now. We see women doing things which never used to happen in Islamic countries. So therefore, I think a transformation is happening in Saudi Arabia, and you will very soon see a lot of tourists going to Saudi Arabia. In fact, they've already started going. I mean, people never used to go to Saudi Arabia except for the Hajj. If we leave out Hajj, there wasn't general tourism. There was negligible. Now we find not only people from Europe, but people from Asian countries have also started. A lot of Indians I find going to Jeddah, going to Riyadh, going to Mecca. There's a lot of infrastructure being built. Very smart cities are being built. Modern cities are being built. Futuristic infrastructure is being built. So I think Saudi Arabia is in the right direction, and I'm sure rest of the OIC, as it's called, the Organization of Islamic Countries, I'm sure rest of the OIC members will go the same way. Of course, we have some countries like UAE who are already ahead in that times, because they started running out of oil much before Saudi Arabia. Apart from Abu Dhabi, the rest of the Emirates and UAE are not left with much oil. So I think UAE took the lead, Dubai for that matter. And I think Saudi Arabia realized that sooner than later, they have to go on that track, which is why we are seeing this cricket sponsorship, which is why we are seeing golf, which is why we are seeing soccer coming to the forefront, Vinny.
Absolutely right. And Adit Kothari, even if they don't run out of oil, the fact of the matter is that the future belongs to technology. The future belongs to electric vehicles. Saudi Arabia definitely needs to make inroads towards India as well, because it does consider India, of course, and it's also true, it does consider India as a technological juggernaut, especially for what we have done in the last few months.
Absolutely, Vineet. I mean, having said that, we also have to acknowledge that almost 10 to 12% of the current Saudi population is of Indian origin. So, you have n number of Indians working, living, and living in Saudi for decades. So, their way of life, their attributes are all related to what Saudi is also trying to do and trying to achieve here by, the sports diplomacy, so to speak. And, with them investing into the IPL structures or the boxing matches like they have done, into the NBAs, into the football, or bidding for the 2034 World Cup football, all demonstrates that, MBS, as Dr. Kohli also mentioned, is trying to make sure that, he can platform Saudi Arabia as a futuristic destination, which has shred all of its religiosity, all of its baggages from the past, and is sort of ushering into the new age, bringing the world together and using sports as a unifying tool and a mechanism. So having said that, Saudi Arabia is moving towards the right direction, with MBS taking the right kind of steps with his sports diplomacy. A lot of analysts have actually come out to say that this is kind of sports washing, where Saudi Arabia is trying to sports wash all of the baggages of the past and all of the ills of the past. But it's very difficult to say that, because 2034 World Cup is 11 years ahead of this time. So history may see this in a certain way, but I don't think he is an oracle of that sort who could predict that the world is essentially going to be looking at 2034 as a sports washing bid of Saudi Arabia for the Football World Cup. Beneath.
Ambassador Kapoor, in fact, Adit used a very important word, sports diplomacy. You've been a diplomat for the most part of your life. How do you fancy the word sports diplomacy, and how can Saudi Arabia, lure India into making it a big partner in terms of sponsoring our sporting events, especially cricket?
Thank you very much, Vineet. This is a very important discussion, particularly in this day and age. And we are deluged with news of the Middle East. We are deluged with news of the Ukraine-Russia war, two big wars currently being fought on the ground in two different parts of the world. And China threatening Taiwan, and so many acts of terrorism. So in this entire bleak scenario, to have a positive activity, sports is a very positive activity. It leads to the right sort of outcomes, right sort of excitement, right sort of engagement, enjoyment, and all your hormones also, which are the positive ones, start moving faster in your own body. So not only at the individual level, but also at the level of mental health, also at the level of the societies and countries and communities, it's a very important activity. Now, for a country like Saudi Arabia to step in a very big way and decide to hold the World Cup, or proposed to hold the World Cup and become an important sort of bidding country is a very important step from where they were. Now, lots of changes are taking place, and India is the most populated country in the world with the maximum population today. US has decided to host the World Cup for cricket for T20 in 2024 along with West Indies. That is another very landmark decision because cricket also will get a lot of limelight. India is bidding for Olympics in 2036. That's another major step. Now, India and Saudi partnering in so many ways, not only in economy or in the Indian Middle East Economic Corridor, or in so many other important initiatives which have already been taken between the leadership. Now to get together and work on these cricketing aspects and football aspects and Olympic aspects between the two countries also will become a major potent force in the world. So I think it's a very, very great step for India to bid for the Olympics for 2036, for Saudi Arabia to bid for the World Cup, for US to sort of offer to host the World Cup for T20 along with West Indies. So this is going to make a paradigm shift. It's going to bring a lot of attention and focus onto cricket also, and India will have to also up its game very significantly if it is bidding for the Olympics for 2036 and clean out the act completely in terms of the allegations of doping, in terms, the government has tremendous capacities, as we have seen with the G20 summit, to do a job which is the best in the world. So similarly, if India gets to host the Olympics in 2036, they will have to do a job which is the best in the world so far for the Olympics. Plus, they will have to also support Saudi Arabia in a very big way so that it can also deliver the World Cup in a way which is the best in the world. So I think it's very good news currently and very much enjoyment. And I'm watching the World Cup and enjoying the cricket match between Australia and India and enjoying it thoroughly. So back to you, Vineet.
Right. And Dr. Jauhri, do you think that sports can be that bridge that countries need in these times? To come up with avenues whereby which, economies of both can prosper?
I think we need sports is certainly a very nice medium for strengthening diplomatic relations, for strengthening cultural relations, because what happens when two countries play, the people of those countries are watching those matches or tournaments, or so they in some or the other manner they align with each other, whether it is victory or loss, that is a separate thing. If we are talking about Saudi Arabia, whether it is cricket or FIFA World Cup, I have felt that Saudi Arabia is all set to become a hub for sports. Just like when I was in college, I used to see Sharjah as a cricket hub, and when we used to see that all important matches used to be organized at Sharjah. So UAE, that Middle East region is already that has already been a center for sports. Now Saudi Arabia has also opened its doors. It is a very welcome step, and more because it is now they are trying to, and they are certainly doing everything to make their image not as it was earlier. So as Dr. Kohli and Adit just mentioned about MBS, so I am also a very big fan of MBS and what he does, how he approaches the world, how he is showcasing his own country, and how he is putting up reforms in the country. So everything is matter, and it is the vision of MBS that is doing wonderful things. And if we must all of us must have seen that today Bhagavad Gita written in Arabian language is available in the Saudi Arabia, even Saudi Arabia. We are not talking about other Middle East countries. So there was a time when if some religious book is caught on the airport, it was confiscated. Mr. Kapoor will agree with me. So today it is a good sign. And the other thing is MBS has also started curtailing the authority of Wahhabis, because MBS wants to project to the world that don't worry, and he wants to make the world confident that now it will not go in that way, the beheading just because of some minor issue. So these things will, I think, it will make Saudi Arabia more popular, more friendly towards the world. And as far as India is concerned, Adit has already said that a very large crowd of our country lives there, and many have settled there. They have become permanent citizens of that country. So I think whatever Saudi Arabia is doing in the field of sports, it is doing a very nice job, and the whole world must commend it.
Dr. Kohli, in your opinion, Saudi Arabia, has the funds, has the inclination as well. And when it comes to the OIC, when it comes to, all the Islamic nations who look up to Saudi Arabia, what kind of, a friendship, it's not that we don't already have a good friendship with the Islamic world, what kind of, better understanding and comprehensive, trade can be established as a result of our bonhomie with Saudi Arabia?
Well, Vineet, we should not forget that Saudi Arabia pretty much leads the Islamic world. If we leave out Iran and probably a couple of other countries, all the Islamic countries, they look up to Saudi Arabia. So, but having said that, I also sometimes see, although Ambassador Kapoor would be the right authority to be confirming that, but I see fissures sometimes between the Islamic world. Some countries, they think otherwise. Whereas some of the countries who are pro-reforms, who want to, open up to the rest of the world, who want to, revolutionize the way they think, the way they do business, there is a group. And of course, within the Islamic world, there are some fissures which are visible. So, but I think if you lead by example, and what happened recently during the Gaza conflict, there was a meeting held in Saudi Arabia, if you remember, where even Iran flew down. There was Irani representative also present. So I personally feel that Islamic world has got that power to unite. And if they look up to Saudi Arabia, the very fact that the meeting was held in Saudi Arabia is indicative of the fact that Saudi Arabia, the Islamic world has reassured its leadership in Saudi Arabia. So I think whatever Saudi Arabia does, I think the rest of the Islamic world is most likely to follow. Obviously, subject to the availability of funds, subject to availability of finances, subject to the government policies, because we should not forget that most of the Islamic countries are kingdoms. They are not democracies. They are kingdoms. They are ruled by certain families who've been ruling for generations together. Their sons take over, then their sons take over. So it's been a generational kind of a politics which we are seeing in terms of Islamic countries. So, but then they have a tendency to unify. So I feel that whatever Saudi Arabia is doing right now, of course, Saudi Arabia is also amongst one of the wealthiest Islamic nations, for that matter. It's got a lot of money, which is why, it can afford to buy a team, it can afford to host, it can afford to, Aramco can afford, it's one of the biggest oil companies, can probably afford to sponsor a Cricket World Cup and so on and so forth, which other Islamic countries may not have that privilege. Of course, there are big companies in some of the other countries. One or two companies are there pretty much in each one of these countries, but not as much as Saudi Arabia. So I think whatever be their capacity, I think Saudi Arabia will be the torch bearer, and it will open up rest of the Islamic world also. I hope so. Although to have MBS kind of thinking, I would say would need a lot of generations as far as rest of the Islamic countries is concerned. It's not easy to be an MBS. If you are in Qatar, or if you are in Bahrain, or probably if you are in some other Islamic, or probably in Kuwait, you may not be as revolutionary as MBS is. But then at least there is a guiding light, and they will realize that the countries which have opened up, just the way UAE opened, if you open up, if you reform, I think that is the future. To be remaining on your fundamentals, to remain in thinking which was 50 years ago, 40 years ago, I think may not gel well in the times to come. The world is changing very fast. Technology is taking over. Education is taking over. Skill development is taking over. Startups are coming up. New age businesses are coming up. Artificial intelligence is coming. Internet of Things is coming. I think these are the things that Islamic countries have now started to realize, that we cannot remain in the oil mode, shall I call it. We have to come out of the oil mode and learn to do business from rest of the world. simply earning money from oil is not going to help our generations to come. So I think Saudi Arabia is likely to be a torchbearer, Vinny. And I feel that, I hope, wish and pray that other Islamic countries also reform in the same direction. And if they do, then as far as India is concerned, although India has got very healthy relations with most of the Islamic countries in terms of bilateral trade and diplomacy as well. But then I feel that these kind of sponsorships, these kind of bilateral relations will only develop from here, will only mature from here, looking at Saudi Arabia. So I hope Saudi Arabia becomes a torchbearer for OIC for that matter, Vinny.
Absolutely right. Ambassador Kapoor, what kind of a motivation and example and inspiration does the rest of the Islamic world need to take from the Saudis, and what specifically MBS is doing?
Well, I guess to change paths so radically from where they were just a few years back to where they are today and where they are headed tomorrow, it's something of a role model for most of the Islamic countries, because instead of being mired in the past of Islam, instead of being mired in madrasas, instead of being not contributing, if I see the contributions to the world stage in terms of intellectual activity, in terms of Nobel Prize winners for the last few decades, the share of India has been very low, the share of China has been very low, but the share of the Islamic world has been very, very low in terms of any scientific advances, discoveries for hundreds of years or maybe even more. So how do you reform yourself as a society, as a community, is very important. Very important mostly for the Islamic world, but also for India and China to understand that how do we take the bull by its horns, because India in the past was one of the biggest contributors to scientific advances, to knowledge, to information, to data, to such great understanding of the ecosystem of the world, of maths, of astronomy, of medicine, of yoga, of health. So in every field, India was in the forefront. What set back India was the Muslim conquests in India, whereby the Indian contribution on the world stage started dropping very significantly after that. And then the British colonial rule, which completely killed it to a very great extent. Now India is emerging again with the new leadership in a very positive way. We have seen how it has emerged on the global stage in so many instances, even with the Global Voice of South Summit, which was just held day before yesterday, and 125 countries participated, the G20 summit before that. So the contribution by India economically is also increasing by leaps and bounds. We were the biggest contributor to the world in the economy for the first 1500 years, more than 25% or more than 30% of the global economy in purchasing power parity terms. Now we have become the fifth largest economy and the third largest in purchasing power parity terms, but we are aiming to become the third largest economy very soon, and thereafter rising to the top of the table in the next 30 years or so. So for all this to come to fruition, the countries which I've just mentioned, and particularly the Islamic countries, have to reflect, have to think what are their contributions to the world, except for terrorism and violence and some contribution in arts and other areas. But in terms of the overall intellectual progress of the world, in terms of the scientific progress of the world, in terms of the Nobel Prizes, etc., they have to sit down and reflect like Saudi is now doing, like UAE is doing. So these are two shining examples in the Islamic world, which have decided and understood that a course correction is required, a change is required, and the future is not the past. The future has to be completely different. Back to you, Vinny.
Dr. Jauhri, your thoughts before we wrap up? Your concluding thoughts?
Yes. Actually, if I am very optimistic regarding the fact that India will partner Saudi Arabia in organizing those events. So it will strengthen our bilateral relations, which are already very nice because of the present government being very approachable towards the and present foreign minister always keen to talk to these countries. But the other thing is, if we talk about revolutionary ideas in Christian world, then it is not a very big issue. But if MBS is doing this in a Muslim world, then it is really a matter so that we all must salute him, because it needs much courage, it needs guts to speak those lines in front of the clerics, which are the torch bearers for the whole Islamic world. So and they are the authorities, because Makkah and Medina are there. Makkah and the whole world, the whole Muslim world goes to Saudi Arabia for their religious voyage. So now at this, despite those things, if MBS is able to do that, I think Mr. Kapoor is also right, and Mr. Kohli is also right, that if Saudi Arabia is doing this and the other world also accepts this, but there is a contradiction in it. What happens? I was listening to Zakir Naik one day, so he said Saudi Arabia अब काफिर हो गया है. मतलब आप सोचिए, so the country which is showing light to the whole world, because they are progressive, because
right,
they
sir.
are progressive in nature, their thoughts are progressive. So clerics here, they call that country in such a bad manner. So
Absolutely
we
right,
are very optimistic. We are very optimistic.
All right, so we've run out of time. Appreciate all our guests for being a part of this conversation.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.